Hello out there, and the other day a viewer commented on one of my videos and asked me to do a comparison video between the Benchmade Anthem and the 940. And I don't actually have a 940 right now, but I do have a 943, which is actually more similar in look to the Anthem. And I figured that's about as good an idea for a video as anything that I'm going to have, so yeah, let's do it. So today we're just going to go through a really quick kind of breakdown of some just main features and specs and stuff like that. Give you a look at both of these knives and just the dimensions of them. And then if you want to stick around later at the end, I'll probably blab on about some Benchmade history and designers, Warren Osborne being the main one, and some product specs and stuff like that. And yeah, just some stuff that's interesting to me that probably most people don't really care about. But when we get into these two knives, if we're talking about like classic, excellent EDCs from Benchmade, these are probably two of the best ones. And the reason for it, and one of the things I've said in a video before, was that they need to really scale back the Anthem and give us a more budget kind of option. And I wasn't even thinking that the 943 is pretty darn close to that already. I mean, if we're looking at just like the basics here, we have just under a 3.5 inch cutting edge on both of these knives. I mean, the cutting edge is almost exactly the same length. The amount of belly it's pretty similar. I mean, the difference in grind, and we'll show that in just a minute as well, but there are some differences, but the basics, as you're just looking at it, it jumps out at you as a lot of similarities. Overall length, it's a little bit longer with the Anthem coming in at just over 8 total inches and a little bit under for the 943 or 940. With that reverse tanto, might be a little bit shorter, but I don't really have one here to show you. One of the things that really struck me about the Anthem the first time I handled one was that it just didn't feel as big as I expected it to. And I don't know if I had just hyped the knife up the wrong way in my head and I expected it to be a very large knife, but it isn't. I mean, the dimensions, if we're looking at like the height of the handle, it's actually really not large at all. We're talking about, 3/4 of an inch in height in most spots. So comparing that to the 943, pretty similar there, although the shape is going to be just a little bit different. Taking a look at the blades and the steel, well, we have 20 CV on the Anthem. That is about as good as we are going to get from a production knife out of Benchmade. I don't know what else they could upgrade to that's out there at this point. 20 CV is pretty much their top of the line. It is a beautiful, beautiful blade. Classic blade shape. I like the height of the grind. This knife performs, and I've really never had an issue at all with their 20 CV. So I don't know if there's a type of grind or a type of like thinness that would improve the performance of the knife, but this is a relatively thin knife behind the edge. Not crazy thin. It's not ground like super thin, and it does feel like a flat grind, so it's not going to be as thin as something like a hollow grind, but our blade stock isn't anything too crazy either, so we're not working with all that much to begin with. Some of the negative information, though, the negative feedback that I have heard about the 943 and the 940 is that it is just a little bit thick, and so it isn't necessarily the best kind of like long-term cutter, and yeah, that can be an issue. Personally, with what I need it for, it's never been that big of a deal. But if we're really comparing them, then that might be something that you want to know. S30V is our standard steel on the 940 and on the 943. But there are enough different versions of it out there where you can get it in just about anything that you want. And you do have a G10 version on the 940 now. And the blades are swappable also. So like the handle scales and the frames are exactly the same for the 940 and the 943. So, whatever color that you have or whatever blade that you have, you can move it back and forth. And you can move, I think you can move the 943 into the G10 on like the 940-2. So yeah, again, lots of different opportunities if you were so interested in doing something like that. But when we're talking about materials, obviously we have the titanium versus the aluminum on this. The titanium does not have any liners, and I will talk about that a little bit later on when I get into detail about the history of this design and Warren Osborne's influence on it. So yeah, no liners here. It's a different kind of axis lock. than one that just runs with the Omega springs. But looking at the inside, you can see the liners on the 943. And then we have a backspacer. This is one piece of titanium here. And so the screws that are coming through are holding the locking mechanism in place here. So it's really the only kind of visual like blemish to the design that's necessary for it to actually function. As far as ergonomics go, neither of these have really great jimping, but there is that like liner jimping that most of the Benchmade axis lock knives have. It's actually pretty functional and in a good spot, but this ramp, I don't know, sometimes this ramp just sort of bothers me. You know, the transition from the blade on this series to the handle can be a little bit of an issue depending on how you're using the knife. It's never been that big of a deal, but I don't know, if I'm picking my ideal knife, I don't have this kind of transition here. Now that said, it doesn't create too bad of a hot spot, and so the knife is still really good to use. And it's not particularly slick on this coating here, though if you had a satin version, it might be a little bit more slick and harder for you to get like a good purchase with your thumb coming down. So if you take a look at that area, like where the scale starts, that's probably where the knife is the most different. You know, and this transition on the Anthem is just significantly improved. And honestly, if you're paying the price for the knife that you have with the Anthem, then you want it to be a lot more, like, I don't know, sleek, streamlined, like clean maybe is the word. Yeah. All right, and then as we move on back, you can take a look at just the different scale designs. The titanium on the Anthem is just, it's awesome. And yeah, it does not have a deep carry clip. This 943 has had one put on it. It didn't come with a deep carry clip. It came with a just that standard Benchmade clip, but you can get replacements pretty easily. For this one as well, but honestly, nah, I'm not really going to change it. Just going to stick it out. Let's take a look at it in the closed position, and if I have the scale handy, I will pull that out as well. Yeah, I mean, a lot of embellishments, obviously, on the Anthem versus the 940 series, but there are plenty of 940s that are going to run almost as much as an Anthem, like the Smoky Mountain KnifeWorks exclusive, if those are ever available, and the Going Gear exclusive, and if you can find the Cabela's one or the KnifeWorks one. KnifeWorks one is a little more just like standard with G10 than anything else, but yeah, a lot of them are going to run $300 plus and be just as like embellished as the Anthem. So 3.74 ounces for the Anthem is definitely a heavier knife with all that titanium versus the aluminum. So it's an ounce. Do you feel the ounce? Yes, but I mean, the Anthem still doesn't feel particularly heavy. So while one is lighter than the other, I don't really give it more credit than the other for that, if that makes sense. All right, and the other embellishments that we have are, you know, just the thumb studs being like decorated and matching the axis bar, which is pretty cool. Yeah, but otherwise, not really sure where else to go with this, but just to say they're both pretty darn good knives. The 940s that I've had, the newer ones, you know, this one's been worn and beat up and has pretty good action, especially opening, but it doesn't like drop shut. The 940s that I've had recently definitely drop shut, and this one, the Anthem, is just ridiculous. I mean, the most ridiculous axis lock action that I've ever seen. So there you go. So that's just a quick comparison, a couple things just to think about when it comes to these two knives. Not sure how relevant that's going to be now that both of these knives have been out for a significant amount of time, but hey, there you have it. And also, guys, if you want to stick around, I am going to talk just a little bit about the designs and why I think they are so similar. If not, hey, thanks for watching. But talking more about the design and the influence of Warren Osborne, who his fingerprints, if I haven't said this already, I mean, he has done so much for Benchmade over the years, but from designing the 940 series to designing the Barrage, the 770, the 960, the Colgera. I mean, there's so many great knives with Benchmade's logo on it that he had a hand in helping make. And the Anthem, I really think, is one of them, even though it doesn't have his, even though he's not credited with the design. And design credit is a tricky thing, and sometimes it's something that people don't really get the credit they deserve if they are involved in a knife. And one of the things that I think about is like the most recent Benchmade foray from a couple years ago. That is a take on the 690 from Alan Elishewitz. It just has some new features to it. And Alan Elishewitz, I don't believe, is publicly recognized as designing it, but it's definitely based off his design. And I don't know if there's something that happens where, like, if you have the basic design of a knife, but then someone takes it to the next level and contributes in this way or that you don't get named as the designer because it's more of a team effort kind of thing. You know, the same thing happened with the Benchmade Volley, which is a definite take on a Barrage. It's thinner and has G10, but it's definitely a Barrage. It's actually listed in the Benchmade catalog as part of the Barrage family, but Warren Osborne is not listed as the designer. So it's one of those things where, you know, you can have influence on a knife without actually being the person who gets the credit for it. And I think with the Anthem, that's definitely what happened with Warren Osborne. Now, is this his blade shape? I don't know, but there is a knife that was called the 780 that he designed that never made it into full production, and picture is being inserted right now. The Anthem, by the way, is, if I can get this focused, you will see that the Anthem is the 781. The 780, which was an Osborne design, was going to be a very innovative and special knife. And to this day, it is probably the greatest, in my opinion, Benchmade grail that is out there because it is super rare and just an excellent story. So the 780 was a stainless steel handled knife. It looked just like a Barrage, so if you saw a picture of it, you would just think that that's a Barrage. But what was special about it was going to be the first linerless axis lock. So if you take a look at any axis lock knife, right, any of them, they're going to have these liners on the inside, whether it's an aluminum frame, G10 frame. The liners don't have to run the entire length of the knife. Most of them don't. But what they are there for is to hold the omega springs and the axis mechanism in. You know, there has to be something to do that, and that's what they use. These liners are on the Griptilian, the Mini Griptilian, 940, 943. I mean, here is another Osborne design, the 770. And while they are extremely small, there are some tiny little liners in there holding it all together. So the 780 was going to be the first knife to not have that. And it was going to be just a special, innovative kind of thing. And the locking mechanism was something that looked very similar to what ended up being in the Anthem here, the 781. Now, what happened with the 780 was just a failure to be able to execute it consistently. And so while they were making that first production run, they crapped out and sort of had to throw in a towel. And from my understanding, and I don't know how true this is, and no one really knows, maybe someone knows, but no one has ever publicly said, at least as far as I know, how many of them are actually in the wild. But I've been told and I've read like 30 to 40 to 50 max. Even though the first production run was supposed to be a lot more than that, they didn't all make it out because it was just such a disaster of manufacturing. And so that's what makes them really rare, and again, makes them just a great story in Benchmade's history. And that was the 780. Now we have the 781, which is sort of, you know, tipping their cap to that knife and that whole experience that Warren Osborne designed. And so I'm sure that he had a hand in the design of this locking mechanism now that we do have a linerless axis lock on the Anthem. But I also think just the lines of the knife are something that he would have done anyway. And so while this will never be called the Warren Osborne Anthem, in my mind, I mean, it has his fingerprint and his stamp all over it. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. If my information is wrong or if you have anything to add about the 780 and that kind of thing, definitely let me know down in the comments and start the discussion. But here it is. Yeah, just my little comparison, talking about the 940/943 with the Anthem, giving you a little bit of a look at the two of them, guys. hopefully this was, if not informative, somewhat entertaining. And if it wasn't either, then hopefully you aren't watching. Thanks again, guys. Take care and have a good one. I will talk with you soon.